Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information that you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, Brandy.
Happy Friday.
Another week, another location.
Yes,
So,
I am
I think-
back in Miami
home?
for now.
There you go. Yeah. For how long? Like a day?
Yeah, well, I leave for London in a couple days, so yeah.
Good night. We can't keep up with you, Brandy.
I
Can't
know.
keep up.
It's been a wild couple months.
Life of a busy COO. I love it.
Mm.
Love it. Glad that you make time for us
Of
on these
course.
beautiful mornings.
You're the best part of my week.
Let's go. Well, we are recording on what day is it? It's August 25th. This episode is a bonus episode for all of our listeners. This is not our normal Monday show, but I'm excited because apparently we've been holding out on an amazing guest to all of our listeners for sounds like a long time. So I'm excited for this. You guys ready and amped up to have Jan on the show?
Let's do it.
yes, the Senior Vice President of Lodging at STR. So
Which
excited
is
to have you on.
also a what do you call it? A underlying company? I don't know what the
Part of
terminology
CoStar.
is. There you go. Awesome. Well, we're gonna welcome Jan Freitag on, and let's get jumping into the data. Jan, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
We are excited to have you
Thanks for having
on. As you and I kind of corresponded on LinkedIn, sounds like we've been kind of withholding an invite to you for a while, and so we apologize for that.
When I grow up, I want to be like Jamie Lane, and he's been out there, being on your podcast. I'm like, okay.
Jamie says
I'm
the same
ready.
about you. So it's, I feel like you've been a big inspiration for him, and you're the original data guru in hospitality. So super pumped to have you on and dive into a lot of the trends that we've been talking about on this show for the past 6 months or so that have been interesting to see across the globe. Some softening in some places, some driving up of rates in many. And yeah, we'll jump into it. Brandy, you want to kick off with your favorite Miami discussion?
Yeah, so, we've been talking a lot about supply and being in Miami. I'm a little biased. I'm seeing it every day. So here we're seeing a ton of supply on the STR side. It's having an impact, obviously, on pricing and revenue and all of that. So just curious what the hotel side in Miami is seeing.
Yeah, very much the same, right? So year to date, supply is up 3% or so for the nation. Year to date, it's up 0.3%. So we have very, very limited new supply in general. The pipeline is sort of static, but Miami, Nashville, New York, Austin, seeing really strong influx, which then has implications obviously for occupancy. The other thing about Miami, of course, is that the run up in rate in 2020 and 2021 was just
Crazy.
what's the word? Amazing, out of this world, crazy,
Unsustainable,
maybe. So and so room rates year to date in Miami are down all that 6%. Now an average room still costs $240, but that's the average, right? So in Miami Beach, in a 5-star property, that's whatever, 5 times that, maybe 4 times that. So we're just coming down to earth, I think. Isaac Colazo, who's that data guy for STR, I'm doing the hospitality part on the CoStar side. He used this frame this as normalization. And I think that's a really interesting word to use in this environment where we see that the markets and classes and location types that sort of over-indexed in 2020, 2021, we did really, really well, are now coming down to earth, and they're not doing so well. So luxury ADRs are actually down, economy ADRs are down. But the property types that didn't do well, specifically upper upscale and downtown locations, are now coming back up to quote unquote normal. So Miami is certainly on the overachiever side. It's coming
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, it
Well,
was
Well-
definitely the darling of COVID, wasn't it? And I think the next thing we want to talk about is the international travel. I think we've seen a ton of Americans traveling to Europe, but it doesn't feel like there's quite as many global citizens coming to the States over the past, I guess, really since COVID. What do you see in the data there?
Yeah. So my favorite data set is actually a government data set that I use all the time. You can Google it. It's called the I-92 APIS data set. Jamie and I talk about it a lot. So what it is the government, sorry, the airlines have to tell the US government who is flying. And so you can see how many Americans are going abroad and how many non-Americans are coming into the United States. And you can then, and this is a super slick interface. It's super easy to use. And the data comes out 6 weeks after the fact, which for government is amazing. So it's part of the Department of Commerce. And whoever the intern was who built this deserves a raise. It's really, really cool, easy to use. But the point is, if you look at for the first 6 months of this year, same month compared to 2019, roughly 10% more Americans are going abroad, and roughly 20% less non-Americans are coming to the US. And I think we're seeing that on the coastal markets, East and West Coast. And we're seeing it in London, in Paris, in Venice, in Rome, where, the Americans are. And there was this article in the Wall Street Journal, I think in February or March, that basically for the high-end suites in Paris, there's like the American dollar propped them up. And those room rates were just phenomenal, for the higher end, because Americans were like, damn it, I've been stuck in my kitchen for 3 years, or I've been to Miami or Colorado or whatever, and I'm done. I don't want to go abroad, and so that's where they spend their money. Now, is that sustainable? Question mark. Are we going to see that next year? I'm not so sure, but for this summer, absolutely, you could speak English in any major metropolitan area in Europe, and you'll be fine because you're just talking to other Americans.
In years past, it seems like trends last more than a year or a season, but since COVID, since 2020, I guess, every year has seemingly been extremely different. The trends, the cycles. Why do you think that is? Is traveler behavior now that sporadic that like new shiny object over here, let's go to Europe. New shiny object, never been to Miami, going here.
I think what we've seen is not normal. I think the travel behavior in 2020, 21 was not normal, and 22, 23 is not normal. I heard this great quote at a real estate conference. The 4 most expensive words in real estate are "this time it's different." When you start investing
I love that.
into that, so I follow Adam Sachs from Tourism Economics that drives the CoStar forecast and STR forecast. And he's like, look, no, it's not ever really different. Yes, there are outliers year to year to year, but the long run trends are the same. So I would not extrapolate what we've seen the last 4 years and maybe even next year to mean quote unquote anything. I think we're going to go back to normal. The only asterisk I would put on that statement is about downtown demand from corporate transient travelers, because I honestly have no idea how return to office plays out in the long run. I'm not sure we're ever going to be back in the office on Fridays, but I could be totally wrong. But there's very clearly a trend to being in the office, not 5 days. Now, there are some outliers, of course, Blackstone and JP Morgan and some of those, New York City centric law firms and PE firms and banks. But I think in general, overall, we're not in the office all the time anymore. And the implication then is that there's fewer demand for corporate transient nights in downtown urban locations. But I don't know how that normalizes. But going back to your initial statement, I think right now we're still sort of in this rebound post-COVID, and that's going to even out back to quote unquote normal.
Yeah, I guess kind of going off of the business travel, there was, I think it was an article in a payments journal, so not something we're seeing all the time, but just saying that the big credit card companies were reporting that their business spend was reaching 2019 levels and even surpassing it. And so I find it interesting to see like the return to office, I think is definitely really interesting. Who knows what that's going to what's going to happen there. But then the in-person business meetings, do you have kind of a sense of if that travel is actually, coming back to what the credit card companies are saying, and you're just having those meetings and you're not necessarily going into the office as like a regular worker?
I am super bullish on meetings. I was in Phoenix yesterday to keynote a meeting with 300 meeting planners, and they're just busy, busy, busy. And the point is, and the way I thread this needle in my little head is to say, because we are not in the office, but we still have to build culture, but we don't have a water cooler around which to build culture. We have to force this water cooler, and we do it by getting everybody to Orlando on a Wednesday night, nice team dinner, Thursday morning training, Thursday afternoon team building, everybody leaves. And that was a meeting that didn't happen in 2017, 18, 19, because we were in the office all the time and we had a water cooler. So I think small meetings and especially short-term booked meetings are really here. And it seems like that they're here
Yeah.
to stay. I'm hearing this is.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing. That makes a lot of sense.
I'm hearing like stuff that we've never heard before, like in the month, for the month, 50 peak. People just like show up and they're like, hey, in 2 weeks, can we get, your, junior ballroom because we have this thing, it's like, wow, in the quarter, for the quarter, super short lead times. What that means, of course, then is for the hotel here who is selling that, they're like, well, but now you're bumping into my leisure customer. Now you're bumping into my corporate transient customer. So am I really going to give you a group rate, quote unquote, with a discount? Maybe not, and that then normally pushes the meeting planners to say, oh, actually, then I want the meeting 6 months from now. And hopefully it elongates the booking window. But right now, it's super interesting time because I think there are some group meetings that are making up for the lack of being.
And if any of these groups ever want a beautiful castle or manor house to come to, please just let me know. We've got a wonderful collection of completely private hire estates. So,
Michael, I thought we said no
shameless
ads on
plug.
this episode.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, shameless plug.
But it's an interesting question, right? So I make this argument all the time. I work for CoStar and I use Concur. I love your castle, but it's not on Concur. I can't book it, so that's, I know that there are smaller groups who like that experience, but if you're sort of in a large conglomerate setting, I got my brands and that's pretty much it.
Definitely. Well, Jan, I'm very curious. This is obviously you listen to the show, you hear us talk about short-term rentals a lot in kind of our every weekly conversation. I want to know from you, outside of event planning and kind of these little topics we kind of talked about now, what can our short-term rental operators and audience learn from the data and the trends that you guys are seeing in the hotel world that maybe aren't as discussed or highlighted in the everyday or weekly conversations through other media outlets that we're normally covering?
I mean, I think it's sort of hard for me as a hotel guy to tell you, especially with attendees, like how your business runs. I think this already, right? Multi-generational travel, is here and is here to stay. And those people want to be together, and they need a place to socialize and they need multiple bedrooms, and yes, a hotel can provide that, but I think, a short-term rental entity, a larger house or so can provide that maybe better. I think we continue to see, this whole idea of, oh, we were all cooped up in COVID, so now we want to hang out with our buddies. We all want to get together. I think this idea of small group, but not group the way we define group, like corporate group, but just like people getting together, is going to continue to be a thing, and that's going to continue to drive part of your demand. So I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee, and we, of course, see that, all the time. Room rates are healthy, especially on a Friday and Saturday night. And I think that people are looking at both. When is it more economical, to get 3 rooms or maybe 3 connected rooms versus getting a short-term rental.
I listened to your recent episode talking about stubbing your toe on Tell Me More, your guys' podcast. So I'll give you a little shout out on your podcast there. But I heard you guys may have seen a bachelorette party on a fire truck. Is that true? At the Hotel Data Conference?
Oh, yeah. No, this is transportainment in Nashville. It's capital T. I mean, we have it all. So we have pickup trucks, we have military trucks, we have fire trucks, we have tractors pulling, hay wagons. We have this thing, a limo that has a hot tub
I've seen that.
in the back, and people are at the hot tub. It just got so crazy. So if it has 4 wheels, and of course, then paddle tub. Say, don't forget the paddle tub, which is basically a bike with 12 to 18 seats and a keg in the middle, and a DJ. And it sounds like an awesome idea, I think, for the first 600
I can
yards.
attest.
And then you're like, look, it's Nashville. It's 108 degrees. Whose idea was it?
Yeah. The pool on wheels sounds more favorable for summertime for sure. Going back to the group travel piece, and travelers are going to select whether a lock-off room is better or a short-term rental. We've talked on this show about the pipeline of extended stay properties in hotels. And I think we touched on this a little bit pre-chat, but 44% of the major flags pipeline is extended stay properties. What does that tell you in the data? And is that them basically coming right at the short-term rental operators in city centers?
So a couple of things are true, right? Number one, in 2020, extended stay hotels outperformed. Everything fell off the cliff. But on the low point, I think the average occupancy for extended stay properties, in the core of the pandemic, summer of 2020, was still 50%. And it came right back up. And we're now looking at, mid to high 60s or mid 70s for the upper end of the extended stay. So they are, if not recession proof, at least recession resistant, because there's always somebody who needs a longer term accommodation, because of life changes, people change jobs, so they have to move because of a variety of reasons, whatever, and that's the extended stay piece was right in the sweet spot of that. And then you get, in addition to that, all the federal money, that is being put into these bills for infrastructure, and then infrastructure is being built. Those construction crews normally also go to the place and stay in longer term stay accommodations. So the owner community then is saying, hey, there's there, I want in. And then the brands follow the owners and say, well, if you build it, I'll put my brand on it and take my whatever 6-7-5%, whatever the franchise fee is, So the owner community drives this and says this is a good idea. So then the brands are saying, okay, we want to be part of it, and you have the loyalty program and all that jazz. I have heard amazing stories, anecdotally, amazing stories. If you have a hotel that really has long-term stay, 90 days, 180-day stays, that your labor cost ratio is relatively manageable and your NOI or GOP is very, very healthy. If you don't have to clean the rooms all the time, if you only need one front desk person, if there's a grab and go behind the front desk, and that's it. So I've heard that they're super duper efficient and therefore super profitable. If your stay is long enough. If you just churn rooms every night, then it's just a hotel and the whole model breaks down. But if you don't, then suddenly your GOP NOI margins are very.
They're figuring out why we run our buildings the way we run them. You have one person at the front desk. It's a check yourself in. I think that, when we saw the Apartments by Marriott launch, that gave me pause because, our selling point is having the apartment. But if we could lose those if you have a loyalty program like Marriott, which is just so robust, and I'm anxious to see how that kind of plays out in the future. Obviously, there's a huge lead time between, planning and building and, coming online. So we have some time, but I'm curious to see. There's just this constant blend of the two industries. And so I think that is something I'm really fascinated about, is how, like, right now we're still differentiating like very strictly between hotel and STR and vacation rentals, but I definitely see in the coming years that all of that data will start to mix, because if you have an Apartments by Marriott, is that an STR or is that a hotel? And so I'm curious to see how you'll be analyzing that data in a couple of years.
Not your company STR, but short-term rental.
Yes, sorry.
So confusing. I scolded Jamie Lane 10 years ago, when he was just talking about STR all the time. I'm like, no, you need to say alternative accommodation. There already is an STR. He's like, no. STR is the term we're using. So here we are. But I mean, with STR being owned by CoStar, maybe it's a little bit easier. So I totally agree with you. I think it's A, super fascinating, but B, learn. And C, if you look to APAC, right, you already have the corporate housing, service apartment concept. It's very much something that we benchmark, in APAC specifically. And they use other service departments in their competitive set. So it doesn't really sort of dilute the comp set per se. But I totally agree with you. If Marriott said, look, it's apartments, and, I know of an example right now being built next to a hotel. So the hotel owner has a hotel, Marriott branded, and they're putting apartments next to it, Marriott branded. Going back to my earlier point, well, if that shows up on Concur, then I can book it. And I, fair disclosure, I have my Bonvoy credit card, so I'm like, okay, given the choice, I'll take my points, And so I think that's going to be super interesting for you to figure out how you tackle that. Because of course there are, loyalists, and then there are just people who need the location and who don't really care, but I think having an 800-pound gorilla in that space on the apartment side with that loyalty program is really going to be interesting to watch.
With that 800-pound gorilla, and then Amex just came out with their vacation homes piece. Have you seen that? What's your take on it?
I have not. Is that like just maybe 3 or 4 bedroom homes?
Yeah, it's similar to Marriott Homes and Villas platform, but through the Amex
still in
platform.
beta.
Yep.
Still in beta though.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that side, I think that has always been, it always existed, and like it just Airbnb made it just a little bit more efficient when they came out, to you didn't have to call some owner in the Keys, you could just go to a website. I think so. There, I think the Virgos and Airbnb was helpful, to sort of make the marketplace a little bit more transparent. But those larger homes have always existed. I think that's a very specific use case. And from a hotel perspective, it's like, yep, good for you. Like that's, not a customer that we had necessarily anyways.
Any data points that are concerning to you? Any red flashing lights that say proceed with caution?
I mean, fair disclosure, right? So the CoStar house call is for recession, right? We used to be absolutely mainstream with that call in January at the Alice conference. And now we reiterate that call at the Hotel Data Conference that we're proposing based on what tourism economics is telling us. Adam Sachs is saying there's going to be a recession in Q4, Q1 of next year. And we are now the lone caller in the desert. It's no longer mainstream. That's an extremist view. Now, why are we saying this? A variety of reasons. But to me, the best anecdote about this is I have a counterpart called the National Director for Capital Markets, and he gave a presentation internally. And he had this awesome slide where he took press clippings from the 70s, 80s, and 90s when people talked about a soft landing. How often they talked about a soft landing, and the Federal Reserve and the IMF talked about a soft landing. And then 6 months later, we are in a full-blown recession. And his point was that the term soft landing is an attribute of the recession. I mean, we are right there. It's all soft landing talk all the time. And he was just like, guys, fooling himself. He doesn't use those words, but that's basically what I heard. So very, very curious to see where we end up as the year runs out. What's noteworthy in that scenario is that CoStar still suggests RevPAR growth in a recession, which we've never said 30 years of data. We've always seen if the U.S. economy contracts, RevPAR falls. This is the first time ever, if it's coming true, that GDP contraction and RevPAR growth. 4.5%. It's not, it's not great, but it's not nothing.
Let's play it out. A recession hits in Q4, Q1. Aside from RevPAR actually increasing by 4%, do new constructions completely halt? Does the luxury segment thrive and the mid market, really just get hurt? Or let's play this out a little bit.
I mean, consumer spending will be curtailed. We have occupancy decelerating, Q4, Q1. The construction pipeline is already so muted. We have 150,000 rooms in construction, and that number has stayed literally the same for the last 18 months or something. So when it stays the same, though, what that means is that the projects that are opening are being backfilled with some projects that are going from final planning to breaking ground. So it's not coming to a screeching halt, right? We are still seeing stuff getting done, for select owners with select regional banks who you have a long-term relationship. This is the fifth, name your brand, Comfort Inn, that you built. They're like, yep, we know you. We love the location. We'll finance that at a much higher cost. But yes, you can still get this done. So I think the pipeline is what the pipeline is. New supply growth looking ahead is very muted and is not going to be a super big concern. I think as the American consumer sort of pulls back, will we see that maybe in the drive to demand on the weekends? Possibly. Luxury is sort of a funny animal, right? I think we've all seen how, agnostic the one percenters, or as, I read this great quote about the basis point. Like, to the people on the far side of the income spectrum, they don't really care how much it is. They just want the experience. So luxury is sort of hard to bet against. I think we've seen that in the pandemic and going ahead. I think, good. We will see the growth rates that we've seen. No, but is luxury fine? Yeah.
Yeah, everybody, likes a nice vacation. And if you can afford it, I feel like the difference in price is not important. You just want to get to that Amman or that Four Seasons or wherever you're going.
Very true. Very true. Well, I'm curious. Yeah. Like, I don't know. Pipeline, I don't think would slow down, obviously, during a recession because it's already started, right? Like, you can't really back up unless it's just like Brandy said, I think either on the pre-chat or early into the episode today, just kind of like an LOI, right? Like an LOI that can go away. Like that's retractable. Breaking ground and doing all this other stuff, not so much. Yeah, you can halt stuff, but that really just is pretty much burning money. So it'd be interesting to see how the traveler, because obviously during COVID, people were getting laid off. There was a bunch of the 2 weeks to flatten the curve type stuff. So people were just spending money out of boredom and necessity of I don't want to be in my house anymore. I'm going to go drive 3 hours away to a glamping site or a nice apartment on the beach or a condo or whatever type of local stay that they can get, and in order to kind of have a little bit of a travel experience. So I wonder if we would see the same depending on how hard this recession is. Do you think it's going to be mild, big? Are you able to maybe give your foreshadow on that, or how
Can you predict our?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, right?
Should I sell everything?
How much money do I need to have? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting environment, right? You have super low unemployment. The inflation rate is coming down and the consumers are still spending. and then you have credit tightening severely, which means people can't borrow money to invest in anything, and rarely they can't invest in what they can build, and you have global macroeconomic sort of gyrations. China's not doing well. There's a war in the Ukraine, and then you have this idea of a recession. So you have these sort of two very opposing forces, and the question is which one will come out, or will we see both somehow? I was giving a talk and sort of tongue in cheek, was just saying, look, this happy-go-lucky thing is a little bit like the Barbie movie, and the other side is a little bit like the Oppenheimer movie. And so we get this like Barbenheimer theme about the state of the U.S. hotel industry in the later part of 2023.
So luck's going to play into it a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
And the
Fed.
Fed.
So, Jan, we like to do a rapid fire with all of our guests. So just try and keep it short and simple on the responses, but pretty basic questions. Are you a beer or wine guy?
Wine.
Beach or ski? Plane or
beach.
train?
I mean, plane, just because that's what I've never
True.
trained station.
Favorite hotel brand?
Can't comment. I love them all. I like my little.
Ho-
But as I said, I mean, I have a trillion like one more point, so probably something in the Marriott family. But that's just
Fair enough. When you travel with your family, are you staying in a short-term rental or a hotel? Always.
Always.
Okay.
I have visited. I can't even admit this publicly, but I've never.
Never.
Stayed
Not a
Never.
beach rental, not a ski rental house, nothing.
I have never rented. Now my in-laws have gotten us to places, where
Gotcha.
I was
So you've stayed in
participating,
rentals.
but I've never myself clicked the.
Man, you live your
Wow.
brand. I love it. I love it.
I don't, no offense either way. But
Jamie's going to come
heartbroken.
after you for that one. Yeah, Brandy, perfect opportunity to invite Jan down for
Yeah,
for an
listen,
experience.
anytime you want to come to Miami or New Orleans, you let me know.
All right.
Wonderful. Well, really appreciate having you on. We'll let you off fairly easy on the rapid fire, but breaking news, Jan's never stayed in a short-term rental. So
That's going to be the title of the episode.
There you go. Never
Yeah.
booked. I've stayed,
Never
of course,
booked.
but I've just
True.
never.
Semantics.
So.
perfect.
I love it.
Well, appreciate you joining
thank
us.
you. Yeah. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks for having me. I
Awesome.
really
Well,
appreciate
for all of our listeners, if you want to check out more of Jan's amazing data, you can follow him on LinkedIn. We're going to tag him in the show notes, and he's got tons of great insight and knowledge. And of course, like always, we'll see you guys again next week.